All right, let's dive into one of the wealthiest and most powerful empires of the early modern world, the Mughals.
It's a huge question, right? And for the Mughals, the answer was, well, completely unexpected.
You'd think an army's greatest weapon, in this case, 1,000 terrifying war elephants, would be the key to victory. But in a wild twist, that very strength actually became their own undoing.
No, the real game changer wasn't a beast at all. It was gunpowder. This new disruptive technology would be the very thing that forged an empire set to dominate India for over 300 years.
So, our story kicks off with a prince named Babur. And this guy had some serious credentials. He was a descendant of two of the greatest conquerors in history, Timur on his father's side and Genghis Khan on his mother's side. Now, Babur first tried to build an empire back in Central Asia, but that didn't really pan out. So he turned his attention east. What he saw was an India that was incredibly wealthy, but also deeply fractured. The ruling Delhi Sultanate was weakening, and all these different kingdoms were fighting for power. And this brings us to one of the most decisive moments in Indian history, the First Battle of Panipat. Babur's army was way outnumbered, but he had an ace up his sleeve: gunpowder. He set up his cannons and muskets, and when the Sultan's massive army charged, the sheer noise of the guns sent their own war elephants into a panic. The elephants turned around and trampled their own soldiers. Just like that, with one stunning victory, Babur toppled the Delhi Sultanate, and the Mughal Empire was born. But conquering an empire is one thing. Holding on to it, that's a whole different story. Babur died just a few years later, and his son Humayun was actually kicked out and driven into exile. The empire's survival was anything but certain until Babur's grandson came along, a ruler who would completely redefine what the empire was. And that brings us to the reign of Akbar. He took the throne as just a teenager, and today he's often considered the greatest Mughal emperor of them all. Akbar was just a master at consolidating power. He expanded the empire's territory through some pretty ruthless military campaigns, for sure, but he also put it on a really stable footing. He set up this clever system called Mansabdari to organize all the nobles and military leaders, and he totally overhauled the tax system, which brought a steady flow of incredible wealth into the treasury. But what's really fascinating is how he decided to rule this incredibly diverse place. He was a Muslim ruling a huge Hindu majority, so he adopted this pretty radical policy called Sulh-i-Kul, which basically means universal toleration or peace for all. He got rid of the special tax on non-Muslims and even sponsored these lively debates at his court between scholars from all different religions. And this is exactly why historians praise him so much. This quote really sums it up. He's remembered for building a state that actually tried to unify all its people, creating something that felt uniquely Indian by blending all these different traditions. Okay, so let's fast forward a bit to Akbar's great-grandson, Aurangzeb. His reputation, it's pretty much the complete opposite. I mean, you just have to look at this comparison, and the contrast seems stark, right? Akbar gets rid of the religious tax. Aurangzeb brings it back. Akbar loves the arts. Aurangzeb bans music at court. The simple story paints a picture of a tolerant founder versus an intolerant successor who basically wrecked everything. But come on, history is almost never that black and white. When we start to dig a little deeper into Aurangzeb's reign, a much more complicated picture starts to emerge. Let's look a little closer here. Aurangzeb's long reign was filled with non-stop, incredibly expensive wars. So getting rid of court musicians, that wasn't just about religious piety, it was also a way to cut costs. Even the controversial damaging of temples was often a political act, a way to send a message to rebellious leaders, not just a religious one. And his simple grave, so different from his ancestors' grand tombs, could be seen as humility, or maybe just one last act of saving the empire some money. So whatever the reasons were, those constant wars really did take their toll. After Aurangzeb's death, the empire began to crack, leading to a long, slow decline. And it's so important to remember just how powerful this empire was. At its height, the Mughal Empire was an absolute global superpower. It was home to nearly a quarter of the entire planet's population. Just let that sink in for a second. But all that stability just vanished. In the couple of decades after Aurangzeb died, the throne changed hands 7 different times. That kind of chaos and turnover completely paralyzes a government.
all that internal fighting created a massive power vacuum. Regional leaders started to break away and do their own thing. And stepping right into this chaos was a new player, the British East India Company. They gradually took more and more control until the very last Mughal emperor was exiled in 1857.
And so, this is where we get to the ultimate takeaway from the whole Mughal story. Their political power, their armies, their government, it all eventually faded away.
But their legacy, it was quite literally built in stone. The empire itself might be gone, but its influence is everywhere you look in South Asia, in incredible monuments like the Taj Mahal, but also in art, culture, food, and language.
Which leaves us with a final, really challenging question. The Mughal story is full of these deep contradictions, incredible tolerance and shocking violence, breathtaking beauty and brutal conquest. And this complicated, often contentious legacy still shapes politics and identity in the region today, forcing us to ask, how do we make sense of a history with such magnificent and brutal extremes?